Well, hey guys, we're in week 2 of this spiritual journey that we're calling Uncharted, really asking God to do a fresh work in us that might lead to Him doing a fresh work through us that might ultimately lead to our church being able to make a bigger kingdom impact than we've ever been able to make before. And we're wrapping this whole series through the lens of the life of Abraham, and we've some verses that we've been looking at are in Hebrews 11. I want to share with you a little bit more of what Hebrews chapter 11 says about Abraham. Now, the context here, if it's been a while since you read Hebrews 11, is this chapter. Some people call it the Hall of Fame of Faith. And the writer of Hebrews lists all of these people that were these Old Testament heroes that are really kind of the highlight moments of the Old Testament, and talks about the faith that they demonstrated. And everybody, other than 2 people in this chapter, only get one verse. They only get a mention. King David just gets the mention just one time in one verse. Everybody except 2 people. Moses gets 7 verses, and Abraham gets 8. In this Hall of Fame of Faith, nobody gets more attention than Abraham for living a faith-filled life. Let me read this to you, Hebrews 11. By faith, Abraham, when called to go to a place he would later receive as his inheritance, obeyed and went, even though he did not know where he was going. That's where we get this whole idea of Uncharted. We're asking God to take us to a new place, a place we've never been before, a place we're not even sure what it looks like, this uncharted place, just like he did with Abraham. It says, by faith, he made his home in the promised land like a stranger in a foreign country. He lived in tents, as did Isaac and Jacob, who were heirs with him of the same promise. For he was looking forward to the city with foundations, whose architect and builder is God. And by faith, even Sarah, who was past childbearing age, was enabled to bear children because she considered him faithful who had made the promise. And so from this one man, and he as good as dead, he was super old and he's having these kids, came descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and as countless as the sand on the seashore. By faith, Abraham, when God tested him, offered Isaac as a sacrifice. He who had embraced the promises was about to sacrifice his one and only son, even though God had said to him, quote, "It is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned." Abraham reasoned, listen to this faith, guys. Abraham reasoned that God could even raise the dead. And so in a manner of speaking, he did receive Isaac back from death. In this Hall of Fame of Faith passage, talking all about these Old Testament heroes, Abraham had this incredible faith-filled life where he believed that even if Isaac had been sacrificed, that God would have raised him from the dead. We'll talk about that more in a few weeks, but I want to talk to you a little bit. What things did God do in Abraham's life that allowed him to live this incredible faith-filled life? I believe it was 2 things. I believe Abraham's extraordinary life of faith was shaped by 2 big things. Here's the first thing. I believe that God used some key, pivotal, defining moments that tested Abraham's faith. We see over and over again through the course of Abraham's life, from this initial call to leave everything that he'd known, to the moment where he is generous with his nephew Lot, to the moment of believing God to have a child even though he was well past childbearing age, and then some moments where it was a defining moment that Abraham didn't even respond to in the best ways, where he finds himself scared and then begins lying. What we see is there are these moments, these defining moments that are tests. These moments that we all experience, moments that feel too big for us. These moments that all beg the question, am I going to trust or am I going to control? Am I going to have faith or am I going to play it safe? These moments of testing can be terrifying. But God really uses these moments in our lives. When we respond well, it builds our faith. We see how God shows himself strong and faithful and comes through. And even in moments where we blow it and we control instead of having faith through the benefit of hindsight, where we're convicted and recognize if I could go back in time, I would have trusted God more and controlled less. I would have played it safe less and taken risks for God more. Even when we look back at those moments of testing, when I respond rightly, my faith grows. And even when I miss it, I look back and wish I had had more faith, which then causes me to have more faith in the future. These defining, pivotal moments where our faith is stretched. But the other thing that we see in Abraham, not only are these defining moments where his faith was tested, which causes stretching and ultimately growth. You see, faith is a muscle, and it really grows by being strained and stretched. But the other big thing that really defined Abraham's life were these constant reminders that the God of the impossible had bigger, better plans for his life than he ever could have made up. See, I think for all of us, we have an agenda for our life, and we have a way we want our life to go, and we can fall into the trap where we believe the lie that God's plan is going to be less good than our plan. And so what happens over and over again in Abraham's life, I'm not a big numerology guy by any stretch, but I couldn't help but notice that we see Abraham's faith is mentioned in 8 verses in the Hall of Fame of Faith in Hebrews 11. And what we also see, according to my count, which could be wrong, but I see 8 unique chapters in Genesis where God affirms his promises to Abraham, where God comes and reminds Abraham that he's invited him in on his story, that he has plans to bless him and to use him that are bigger than he ever could possibly imagine. That where God confirms these promises in Abraham's life that were way too good to be true. They were amazing. And so we see this thing with Abraham's life, these defining moments of testing where Abraham had to decide, am I going to trust and believe? Am I going to play it safe or am I going to step out in faith? These defining moments of testing faith, and then these reminders where God reminded Abraham of his promises and his faithfulness in his life. I really pray for all of us that this Uncharted journey will be a moment that really is defined by these 2 things we see in Abraham's life. A moment where our faith is tested, a moment where our faith is stretched, a moment where we really decide, am I going to trust God or am I going to play it safe? Am I going to try to be in control? And then also that it could be a moment where we really are reminded that God's ways are best and that he has better things in store for us than we have in store for ourselves. That we could go through life with our agenda and our ideas of what success looks like and what security looks like, or we can fully embrace God's plan and his promises and his principles. And so let's invite God to use this journey to reveal where our faith and trust are currently, and ask God to stretch and grow us in this defining moment. Let's yield our instinct to control and to trust the God of the impossible. Trust that he has so much more in store for us, better than we could ever imagine. Guys, I couldn't be more grateful that God has allowed us to be on this journey together, and I have an increasing heart of expectation of all that God is doing in our hearts, aligning our priorities with his more than ever, aligning our passion for his kingdom more and more, and of all that God's doing in us and all that God's going to do through us. I love you so much. Check out this story from a family at LifeChurch.
I'm actually a native Nevadan, born and raised in Yerington, Nevada. And if you've ever been to Yerington, you know it's just a nice farming, small town.
So my mom was Mormon, so I lived in Mormonism for most of my childhood. So as I grew up and got out of the home, or moved out of the home, I started seeking, I started looking. And Kevin and I were high school sweethearts. And so we ended up married and back in Yerington, when we had our second son is when my husband got saved at Yerington Vineyard, which was very, very exciting. Pastor Tom was our pastor, and raised our boys. And then we moved to Reno in 2012.
I'm kind of spoiled because my church experience is the Chisholm family and Reno Vineyard and LifeChurch.
The transition for us was really great. We felt welcome. It was crazy to go to Damani High School. Kevin did all this setup, tear down stuff, and it was crazy busy. And that dedication from everyone is still here and alive today. And that's what I love about LifeChurch is they are a serving church.
The community at LifeChurch has just been awesome, and through our home group and through serving on the setup and teardown back in the day and all that good stuff, there have been some friendships that we continue today. That just because of that community experience that you get at LifeChurch, it really does welcome you in with open arms.
We're business people, so we get the business side of things for the church, but we also get the spiritual side of things for the church. And so this new Uncharted initiative is just another step in the right direction.
For us, it's just amazing to see how he's been moving in everybody's lives. Again, it's one of those situations where I think for me personally, I trust God with everything, so I don't have any reservations about doing it, what have you. And that's been a big thing for me personally, is how he's moved on my heart and my spirit. And I'm going, yeah, we can do this.
The fact that they are still making children first is huge. It's such a wonderful blessing to watch the kids.
And yeah, someday, not that we're a huge part of it, but someday we can look back and say, yeah, that's part of our legacy. We were a little piece of this puzzle.